Well, hello everyone, and welcome to Rise City Church Online. We are so glad you joined us today. And if this is your first time, you're hanging out with us, checking us out online, thank you. And even if it's not your first time, but we haven't had a chance to connect with you, we would love to do so. Right now, you can pull out your phone and you can text the word guest to the number 484848. Guest to 484848, and we'll send you a short form just to let us say hello, talk with you. And for doing so, we will send you some information about Rise City and a coupon for a free Chick-fil-A sandwich. So please do that today if you haven't had the opportunity to do that yet. And also, if you're someone who's out there and maybe you've been coming for a while and watching us online, and you just need someone to talk to, someone to connect with, talk to some member of our pastoral staff, or even just submit a prayer request, you can pull out your phone and text the word CARE to that same number, 484848. Again, the word CARE. And there we'll just send you a link to submit any prayer requests or to set up a time to talk with one of us here at church. We know this can be a hard season, and we would love the opportunity to do that with you. I want to let you know about a few things that are coming up here at Rise that you can take advantage of, even if you're joining us online. The first is we have a class that we do occasionally here called Rise to Life. This is a class that I teach, and it's an opportunity for us to explain what we mean by this phrase, wake up, rise, and shine. What does it mean to really be a follower of Jesus and to live the life He's called us to rise to life in Him? Now, this class is great for people who are maybe just starting their faith, checking it out for the first time, but it's also something that we've found is great for people who've been doing it a long time to think a bit more deeply about what all this stuff means and how it relates together. So I'd love to invite you to join us. And here's the great news. You can join us here on ground in our church building if you're comfortable, or if you prefer to stay at home, we'll have a Zoom option that you can join the class online as well. So we're gonna start that on Sunday, November 8th. It'll be from 6 to 8 p.m. It's a 3-week class. There's no cost. If you do choose to join us on ground, we have free childcare. Obviously, that's not an issue if you're online, but either way, we'd love for you to sign up. You can go to our website, risecitychurch.com/events, and you can sign up for the Rise to Life class there. You can also do it on our app or on the e-news that comes every Sunday morning. So we'd love to have you join us for that event.
The highest King would welcome me. I was lost, but He brought me in. Oh, His love for me. Yes, His love for who the sun sets free. Oh, it's free indeed. I'm a child of God. Yes, I am. Free at last, He has ransomed me. His grace runs deep. While I was a slave to sin, Jesus died for me. Yes, He died for me. Who the Son sets free. Oh, it's free indeed. I'm a child of God. Yes, I am. In my Father's house, there's a place for me. I'm a child am chosen, not forsaken. Yes, I am who you say I am. You are for me, not against me. Yes, I am who you say I am. I am chosen, not forsaken. Yes, I am who you say I am. You are for me, not against me. Yes, I am who you say I am. Sing it out. I am chosen, not forsaken. Yes, I am who you say I am. You are for me, not against me. Yes, I am who you say I am. I'm chosen. I am chosen, not forsaken. Yes, I am who you say I am. You are for me, not against me. Yes, I am who you say I am. Yes, I am who you say I am. Yes, I am who you say I am. Who the Son sets free, oh, is free indeed. I'm a child of God. Yes, I am. In my Father's house, there's a place for me. I'm a child of God. Yes, I I searched the world, it couldn't fill me. Man's empty praise and treasures that fade are never enough. You came along, put me back together. And every desire is now satisfied here in your love. Hey, oh, there's nothing better than you.
We're so excited about this series that we're continuing today, looking at marriages and the importance of finding health in them. And I want to let you know, as Pastor Brandon continues today, we realize that sometimes as we talk about this stuff, it can well, I need more help, more resources. And we actually have a number of books and podcasts and things that we think can be really helpful for you. And so as we continue this series, we would love to encourage you to jump online, our website, to Rise City Church /resources, where you can find a list of some of the books and other resources that we think are really helpful in developing your marriage. So really encourage you to take advantage of that. And of course, as we continue, just want to say again, thank you for your continued generosity, for the way that we are coming together as a church and people, supporting our community and continuing to do what God has called us to do. And obviously that's not possible without your generosity. So today, as you continue to give, whether that's online through our app or website, or bringing a physical check to the church or mailing it to our office, thank you so much. Let's go ahead and continue our time together with another great message from God's Word about marriage.
So I want to start with a question today to really lead us into our topic as we continue our Exposed series, where we're trying to shine light on the shadows of our relationships, these things that have really kind of bubbled to the surface, particularly throughout the COVID season that's been exposed. And we're hoping that God, as they come to light, he can bring hope and healing to us in these areas, particularly in our marriages, because marriages have really had some hard times in the last few months. But here's the question that I want to start with. What if I told you that there is a way to tangibly experience God? What if I told you there's a way to tangibly experience God and it would also bless your marriage? Would you want to know what that is? Something that could help you tangibly experience God and it would also bring blessing to your marriage. Would you want to know what that is? I mean, I hope so. I hope you're like, yeah, I mean, please tell me what it is. And what we're going to talk about today, I believe, will help all of us tangibly experience God. And if you're married, it's going to bring blessing to your marriage, because we're going to be looking at how we go about handling our finances. Yep, that's right. We're going to have a little bit of a money talk, because if you're married, you know this. How frequent is money a part of your conversation or your arguments, right? We talked about last week, communicating through conflict. Maybe the most pressing conflict that you constantly are working through is money management. And so we've got to look at this. And as a pastor who does a lot of counseling, I can't tell you how many couples come into my office and the sticking point, the major source of friction is, well, he spends his money this way, or she does this with money, or money, or debt, or this. And if we can figure out how to handle our money in a way that I believe that God calls us to, I believe we will experience God and it will bless your marriage. Because frankly, many people, and maybe not you, I don't know who's all watching, but many people are pretty irresponsible when it comes to their finances. But we're gonna look at 4 questions. If we can even answer these 4 questions today, it will help move from irresponsibility to responsibility, and I believe it will help bring hope and healing. And so I personally, just so you know, I am passionate about this particular topic, because at this point now in my life, I would say that I feel like I am responsible with my money, but that was not always the case. And I personally have experienced God in some really incredible ways as I begin to apply God's principles with handling money. And so I want that to be the case for you as well. And I just believe that when there's some type of margin, when there's some type of a budget, when there's less debt, and there's actually the ability to say, hey, we're doing what God has called us to with our money, I do believe it brings freedom. It brings joy. It lets you exhale a little bit. It's not gonna happen overnight, but it can happen. And I hope that my wife and I's even story would be an encouragement to you as we've moved now 14 years through this and started to breathe a little bit easier. So let me start with Jamie and I's story financially, and then I want to look at 4 questions, as I mentioned, that I think can really help us in this conversation. So Jamie and I come from different family backgrounds in terms of money management. If you're familiar with Dave Ramsey, he classifies people in two camps. He says some people are nerds in terms of money, others are free spenders. Jamie grew up in a nerd house. I grew up in a more free spending house. So Jamie's a big nerd. I was a free spender. And when I got to college, that free spending tendency really got out of control because I was introduced. I mean, it came right in my mailbox to this magic plastic card with 16 digits on it that if you just type in or use those 16 digits, you can get whatever you want, whenever you want it. You don't have to pay for it. I mean, it's amazing. And then by the end of college, that magic piece of plastic, along with my school loans, as well as a car loan, got me in about $40,000 worth of debt. And then I met Jamie, the nerd. And she has a big fat zero in terms of debt. Hey, babe, look what I got for you, you know? And our different tendencies really came to a head on the first birthday that we celebrated together for her. It was her birthday, the first time since we were dating, it was her birthday, and I was so excited to get her an incredible birthday gift. And I bought her a camera at Best Buy. Now, when I gave her this camera, I knew she loved taking pictures. I knew she was gonna like this gift. I was like, this is a good one. This is a good one. Gave it to her, of course, just like I thought it was perfect. What I envisioned, she's like, oh, it's amazing. You're so awesome. I love you. And I was like, yeah. And then it was like this moment of sobriety hit. Like she was excited, I was excited, and then it hit her. Her nerd side came out, and she looked at me, she goes, how'd you pay for this? Well, you know, they had this great deal of 0% financing at Best Buy, so I didn't really pay anything now, but I'll pay for it in the next 12 months, but it's awesome. And you know what my nerd wife said to me? Take it back. Take it back. Take it back. Like, who you talk? What? Like, you love it. No, take it back. We are not going to have this be the pattern of our relationship. And you can imagine I was very defensive, but I ended up taking it back. But that moment was catalytic to really move me from a free spending mentality to team nerd. And over the next 5 years, we went on this kind of ruthless pursuit of getting out of debt. We were married a few months later. And I mean, this is how much we were intense about saying we are going to try to begin honoring God with our money, and we're going to get out of debt. And so our wedding money, I remember, I think it was like $1,000, $2,000. I don't know. Like people give you money. And I was like, people were very generous with us. Do you know what we ended up spending that money on? We paid off one of my school loans that was for a trip that I had taken to China 2 years previous. And the only reason I went on that May term trip was to go to China with not Jamie, but another girl, my ex-girlfriend. When we got our first home, the first, I don't know how many months, 6 months, 3 months, 6 months, we didn't have couches in the front room and no curtains. And I remember having college students over because I was a college pastor, and they sit on the floor and they're like, why don't you have anything to sit on? It's like, because we don't have any money and we're paying off debt. Why don't we have any curtains? Because curtains are a luxury. I'm still paying for stuff I don't even remember back in college. But 5 years later, I remember writing that last check. And since then, there's been a freedom. And we've been fortunate to be able to stay out of debt ever since then. I don't know how we would have been able to move out here to California and live here if we would have had debt. I mean, we don't, but it's still almost suffocating living out here. You know that if you're watching here in California, it's expensive. And I don't tell you that story to say, ooh, look at us. I tell you that story because I want you to know it's possible. And I also want you to know that God does have a plan. God does have a way. And if we begin to honor his plan and honor his way, then I believe that you at some point can exhale as well and begin to experience the same freedom and joy that comes when we say, God, I trust you with my money. And as I trust you, I tangibly will experience you. And I promise you, if you're married, it will bless your marriage. So let me look at 4 questions. 4 questions that, here's the thing, even though that I feel like we're both on team nerd now, money is still a prominent conversation in the Grant household. And oftentimes, sometimes it's a good conversation, but other times there's still conflict. We still have different preferences about what we spend money on and all that kind of stuff. So these are questions that we still ask today. If we ask these questions, I believe it can shape our framework and our mentality of how we go about handling our money so we can experience God and see our marriages blessed. First question, whose money is it? Whose money is it? How you handle your money starts with how you view whose money it is. When you work and you get a paycheck, do you view that money to be, wow, this is my money? Is there an ownership mentality? Like, this is my money, I worked for it, I earned it. Perhaps you work, perhaps your spouse works, and now you got a couple paychecks. Is it viewed as your money? Or whose money might it be? And when we look at the scriptures, God is very clear to say, it's not your money. It's not your money. It's actually God's money. And when we begin to shift our perspective to see ourselves not as owners of the money, but rather as what I would say as stewards of the money. A steward is simply someone who's been entrusted with something to manage it well and then to give an account later for saying, this is what I did with what you gave me. When we begin to see ourselves as stewards of saying, this is God's money, it's not my money, it changes how we go about spending that money. Psalm 24, verse 1 says this, says, the earth is the Lord's and everything in it. It's all God's, everything. The world and all its people, it belongs to him. It belongs to him. Your money is not your money. Your money is ultimately God's money that he has entrusted to you. And if you're married, I would say your money is not your money and her money is not her money and his money, like it should be collectively one, merge your bank accounts, people, because there's this whole idea of oneness. That's a whole nother sermon. But then the money that you cumulatively have together is what God has entrusted you with because it's his. It all belongs to him. And he said, okay, now I want you to be wise and to use this according to the way I've called you to use it. And so how does God want us to use his money? Right? So if we are stewards, if we are money managers, we're not masters of it, but we're managers of it, how does God want us to use the money he's entrusted us with? And in 1 Timothy chapter 6, verses 17 through 19, this is what we see. It says, teach those who are rich in this world. Now, some of you, I'm saying that multiple times, because some of you, when you say, oh, I'm turning off now, Pastor B, I'm not rich, so this verse isn't for me. You're wrong. If you are watching and you are an American, I don't know if we have any non-Americans watching, that's not for you, but if you're an American, you are rich. Our people in poverty in this country are at a higher level economically than most people around the world. So I believe that the Apostle Paul, who's writing this, he's writing to us. So anybody, Americans, teach those who are rich in this world not to be proud and not to trust in their money. Because why? It's unreliable. It comes and it goes. Their trust should be in their God. Why their God? Because it's all God's, and God's ultimately the ones you trust with. So I trust God more than the money. And he richly gives us all that we need for our enjoyment. You see, one of the purposes that God gives us money is to meet all of our needs. Now, there's a difference. My dad used to say this all the time. There's a difference between a need and a want, right? The things that you need, the sustenance you need, the food, right? The water, air, shelter, clothing. He gives us all that we need, and he gives us that for our enjoyment. Oftentimes, we go after the wants and think that's what's supposed to bring joy, but God says, no, I want to supply all of your needs, and when all your needs are met, it's because I'm a good father. It's for your enjoyment. So one reason that God says, I've given you money, because he does. He wants to provide for you. Take comfort. God knows what you need. He wants to provide for you. But you can't think about wants, all the extra stuff. I'm talking about like the basic stuff for your enjoyment. Tell them then to use their money to do good. They should be rich in good works and generous to those in need, always ready to share with others. The second thing that God wants us to do with our money is to be generous and to do good. To use what God has given us to help others who are in need. He meets our needs for our enjoyment. And then he also says, and then also how do you leverage this money to help others and to do good? And I love that it's kind of an opening category. There's so many ways that you can do good, right, with your money. You can give it to different people. You can take someone out to dinner. I mean, you can buy someone a gift. I mean, there's so many things, but still have an others-mindedness with what you have. And God says, it's my money. I've entrusted it to you, and I want to provide for your needs, and I want you to find joy in that and contentment, and then also do good. Do good. Be generous with those in need. Always ready to share. If you are a parent out there, you teach this to your kids, but yet we are very bad to apply it in our own lives. We say, share, share, share. Why don't we share when we get older oftentimes? And in marriages, right, we start fighting about, well, that's mine, or you bought this, or that's this, or this. And oftentimes that's a matter of fighting over wants. Like things that it's not even a matter of needs, it's a want. And we're not even considering like, well, how can I use this maybe to bless my spouse, or for us to come together and bless somebody else, or to give it to someone else who could use it more, right? So it's important to ask the question, whose money is it? And if it's God's money, then we have to ask, okay, I'm the steward. God, how do you want me to use it? And he says, I want you to use it to provide for your needs and find joy in that. And I want you to be generous and share it with other people. Whose money is it? Next question. What's our budget? Make sure you see the word our budget. Like I didn't say what's a budget. Some people live like what's a budget? No, what's our budget? And for the married couples out there, it's our. It's like how do you both come around the same budget? Now, if you are not really sure what's a budget is simply you telling your money where it's going to go. I know how much we've got. Let's create these categories and let's make sure the money goes to these places. Each month, let's see what comes in, what goes out, and we tell the money where it's going to go. But you've got to ask, what is the budget? When I have a certain amount of money, could be a little, could be a lot, what am I going to do with it? Where's it going to go? And if I am proactive and you are proactive as a couple in creating a budget, you're telling the money before you even get it, because hopefully if you do get a paycheck, you know it's going to come once a month or twice a month, and you're saying, when it comes, this is where it's going. But you got to create a budget. You got to create a budget. There it went. Got to create a budget. Now, when it comes to creating a budget, I'm not going to spend time talking to you in this time just about all the different line items. I would love for you to do that. And if you need help with that, you can get a hold of me, or we're actually going to be offering a Financial Peace University class in January. Highly encourage you to be a part of that. But I just want to start off by encouraging you to have a priority-based budget versus a preference-based budget. So we say, what's our budget? Make sure that it's a priority-based budget over a preference-based budget. So what's the difference? A priority-driven budget operates, because this is the way God calls us to live, is to give first, save second, live off the rest. Give first, save second, live off the rest. You're saying the priorities that we have in our marriage, we're gonna give first, save second, live off the rest. A preference-driven budget, which is like wants-based versus needs-based, is I live first. I get whatever I want. I do whatever I want. I live first, I save second, and then I give what's left. It's like backwards, right? Priority-driven, give first, save second, live off the rest. Preference-driven, man, YOLO, baby, YOLO, live first, save second, probably not saving actually at all, and I'll give what's left. We want to create a priority-driven budget, which is this idea of give first, save second, live off the rest. Let's talk about this. Give first. When you create a budget, how can you, from the very get-go, be generous? If you read the scriptures, it talks about setting aside a portion of your income. Labels it sometimes as the first fruits. Some translations talk about a tithe, which is actually a percentage of 10%. But how do you say, God has given me this, he's entrusted me with this, and the first thing I want to do is use this for kingdom purposes. I'm going to give first. I'm going to give first. And this is so pivotal because giving diffuses the power of greed. Giving creates a level of recognizing I'm not an owner of this and God gave me this and he's told me to first be generous. And so you're proving you're a steward rather than an owner mentality when you are generous on the front end. And when you choose to give first, then I would highly encourage you, some of you, that's I don't have any margin left. I can't do that. But you start, how can I start with some percent? I would encourage at some point, how do you get to 10% or more than that? But I start with 8% a month on a consistent basis. But I say, God, you give this, I want to give it. I'm going to give first. And when you begin to do that, this is where you're going to tangibly start to experience God. I really believe that. I believe you're going to start seeing God at times provide in ways that you weren't expecting. With the money that you give, you're going to begin to see God bless other people's lives. And it begins to bless your marriage because it becomes fun. Jamie and I find joy in being able to give money away because of what happens when we see it impact lives. Or when we give money consistently. We give 12% here to this church every single month. And when God does great things in this church, we're like, wow, he let us actually be a part of that. That's amazing. That's amazing. We've seen at times, I remember we were trying to get out of debt at one point, and we still said we're gonna give first. How God would all of a sudden give my wife new photography jobs and stuff like that, which would then just, we'd give it, but then he'd provide in different ways. Or somebody else would meet our need and help us in our time. You will tangibly experience God, but you won't unless you begin to faithfully say, I'm gonna try this. It's a step of faith. This church, Rise City Church, exists because of your generosity. What God is doing here comes about because people said, I earned the money, but I want to give it faithfully. And then, man, so many of you, right? You can give testimony. You can give testimony that God has changed your life. And if you've given, your gift has been a part of that life's transformation. So we give first. Pick a percentage and say, I'm going to go there. And then how do you increase that percentage? Maybe each year. Save second. Save second. How do I prepare for the times that I'm not sure when they're gonna happen? How do I prepare for COVID, right? Or when I lose my job, or when I get hours cut, or there's a medical bill we weren't expecting, or my car breaks down, right? If you begin to say, I'm going to give first, save second, I'm gonna put a portion of my income aside. You know what you make and what you can do, but you start again with a percentage and say, I'm gonna keep doing that. And it's gonna be used for an emergency. It's gonna be used at some point, right? For something that was unexpected. But you have to get in the habit of beginning to save second, because then it creates a little bit of margin. Because when you don't have margin, a marginless marriage is a pinched marriage. It elevates the stress. And having just a little extra, and I trust me, I understand, especially the California, this is hard. But it starts with the discipline, and you keep growing with it, and you say, I'm gonna put this aside, and I want to save. At the very beginning, maybe just a tangible step. How do you save $1,000? How do you get to just $1,000 in an emergency fund? And say, at least I've got that. In case something happens, it's a great start. How do you get to that point? But just consistently begin to save. And then last, you live off the rest. You live off the rest. This is where all the other expenses come in, right? So essentially, you're training yourself, I would say, to try to live off at least 80% of your income or less. Because if you can get to the place of giving 10% or more, saving 10%, living off 80%, you've got some margin. But this is where you're asking, okay, I know there's things I've got to pay for, whether it's my mortgage or my rent or my utilities, right? We've got to put food on the table and clothes or my kids' school and all that kind of stuff. And you say, what do we got left then? This is where you have to ask questions like, do I really need Netflix, Disney, Hulu, YouTube, and all those channels and Cox? Or maybe do I just get one or none, right? Do I really need that amount of storage? Do I really need that upgrade? Should I buy that car? Should I not buy that car? Can I afford that car? Can I not afford that car? But you're looking at with the 80%, where's that money gonna go? If I wanna go on a date with my wife, which is a good thing, how do I budget and say, okay, we're gonna go on a date and we're gonna have this much money each month to go on a date, or I need babysitting. You tell your money where to go and you live off the rest. You live off the rest. And this is where it can get sticky. I'll just tell you this, and I'll move through the next couple points a little quicker. This is where preferences start to show themselves. This is where you're gonna find tension, because sometimes if you be on the same page, like we wanna be generous first, we wanna save second, to live off the rest, it's like, this is where you're like, well, I've worked really hard, so I would like to be able to go out to dinner and get a nice steak. But she says, no, I would rather go and get a nice blouse or some shirt or pair of jeans. You're like, well, that's dumb. And she looks at me and says, well, that's dumb. Hypothetical situation, of course. But no, you have different preferences, and so you're gonna have to walk through that. Maybe it's giving each other an allowance and saying, hey, here's your $100, you can do whatever you want, I'm not talking about it, vice versa. But you're gonna have different priorities and preferences. But you work on that in the live in the rest category. And as you begin to do that, and you have constant conversations, and you're each month talking about a budget, I promise you, you're not finding yourself near as surprised. And you're beginning to say, wow, look what God is doing. Look what God is doing. Next question. Will this put us into dumb debt? A lot of marriages are sinking, and they're sinking under the weight of creditors. I've been there. I shared that. There's always a payment, and this thing called compound interest, which is a brilliant economic principle, but it's brutal for the consumer. It just keeps adding and adding and adding. But we've got to ask, if I'm going to make this purchase, is this going to put us into dumb debt? Dumb debt is debt that doesn't have an accruing value. That's actually a term that I get from Dave Ramsey. So like, for example, a mortgage isn't necessarily considered a dumb debt because it generally appreciates over time. A car, and I know a lot of people love their cars, but a car loan, the minute you drive off the parking lot, boom, the value drops big time. So it's not a great investment. Now, the Bible, just so you know, the Bible never calls being in debt a sin, but it definitely says it's unwise. And many of you know what that unwisdom feels, or that lack of wisdom feels like, because of the suffocation from the debt you feel. Scriptures say this: the borrower is slave to the lender, Proverbs 22:7, right? Like that you feel bound, like I always have to pay Mr. Visa or Mr. MasterCard, or I always gotta go pay. Like you are a slave to the lender. You're not telling your money where to go. They say, well, nope, we'll tell you right now. Jesus said it this way. He said, beware, guard against every kind of greed. Life is not measured by how much you own. Oftentimes we find ourselves getting into dumb debt because greed takes on many forms. And we feel like it's an emotional reaction that we feel like I've got to buy this, I got to get this, I got to have this. It's going to make me feel better, it's going to make me look better, it's going to make me whatever better. And in those moments, greed is wrapping its claws into you, it's digging its claws into you, saying it knows its outcome is trying to bring you down. And so we've got to be people who try to avoid dumb debt. Not because it's a sin, because it's unwise and it's not healthy for your marriage. But I could make a biblical case, like Jesus, right, paid our debt of sin, so we wouldn't be in debt. So it doesn't make sense for us to be in debt. But even our own leadership of our country, I mean, this is just a normative value to us. It's like that you would go in debt, but like it doesn't have to be that way. It doesn't have to be that way. And so if that's you, I would encourage you, get rid of your credit cards. I mean, you're like, oh, no, I got points. Well, who cares about your points if you still owe money all the time? If you can actually handle the credit card and you can keep a zero balance, then maximize the points. But I pay my credit card off every 3 days. I know, I'm a big fat nerd, but every 3 days. So I just want a zero balance and I get the points. But the points aren't worth it if you can't pay the bill, and it's going to continue to mount. Now, let me say this before I go to the last point. I understand that there are moments that even if you've saved and everything else, life can just punch you in the gut. And sometimes there are those moments that you have to put something on the credit card, something happens. But I believe the more you're asking this question of, is it dumb debt or not, perpetually throughout your life, it will help you be ready for those punches, because then you're not owing these creditors in the moment when you actually need some liquid capital. What if you actually chose to pay cash for things? What if you actually chose to say, if I can't afford it, I'm not going to buy it. I mean, it's revolutionary. I know this is like home economics 101, but like what, can you afford it? My wife, how'd you pay for that? Well, you don't buy now and pay later, because actually you never bought anything now. You got it now, pay later. How about buy now, pay now? Just saying, it would change a lot of things. It would change a lot of things. Some of you, I'm going to last question. I know you're mad at me. Some of you are really mad at me right now. And it's because I'm stepping on toes. And I've had my toes stepped on in this category before. But that toe stepping is worth it because it can bring about tangibly experiencing God and blessing your marriage. Last but not least, last question, what will God say to us in our heavenly audit? You ever thought about that? Like, what will God say to us being the married couple? What will he say to us in our heavenly audit? Did you know that there's an audit? That the Bible talks about, that God's going to give an account, right? We're entrusted with it. He says, here's the funds. What did you do with it? And in Matthew 25, there's a parable that Jesus tells that, and it's so, oh man, it's convicting. But it talks about these guys, and some were given 5 talents, which was a type of money back then. One guy 2 talents, another guy 1 talent. Master gives the money, goes away, says, I'll come back and see what you've done with it. And just do something with it. The guy with 5 invests it, turns to 10. The guy with 2 invests it, turns to 4. The guy that had 1 talent buried it and didn't do anything with it. Master comes back. Master in the situation, being the God figure, comes back and he says, well, what did you do with the 5 talents I gave you? And then the guy with 5 said, well, I made 10. And you know what? The master said to the guy who went from 5 to 10, he said, well done. Well done, good and faithful servant. Come and share in your master's happiness. Good job. The guy with 2 went to 4. What did you do with what I gave you? I had 2 and I made 4. Oh, well done, good and faithful servant. Come and share in your master's happiness. And you can just see the facial expression on the guy with 1 because he knows, oh no. But he plays it cool. What did you do with your 1? I didn't do anything with it, but I buried it and I didn't lose it, so at least I kept it. And did you know what the master said to that guy? Maybe it was a lady. You wicked, lazy servant. What will your heavenly audit say? Will God, based upon what you have done with the money you've been given, if you stewarded it well, will he say, well done, good and faithful servant? Or will he say, man, you were wicked and lazy? I don't want to hear those words from anybody, much less my God. And so if we begin to ask these questions and consider whose money is it? Is it in the budget? Is it going to put us in a dumb debt? And what's God going to say about this when he actually does come give an account? I want to hear good and faithful. And we have a good and faithful God. We have a gracious God who will be gracious to us. Even if you're hearing this, you're like, well, I'm already so behind. You can start a new way now. You can. You can. And so I just want to encourage you. Just take the next step. The next step simply, maybe you need some help with just trying to figure out, how do I start this process? Can I just tell you, we would love to meet with you. Like, we've got some people on our staff. I feel like I'm pretty good with this. We got people in our church that would love to help you. We're going to be, as I mentioned, having this Financial Peace University course in January. That's 9 weeks. I highly, highly recommend you take it. If you're interested at all and you want to get on the list for it, simply text FPU to 484848. That's FPU to 484848. And we'll send you something so we can get on the waiting list. But don't just like look at it and say it's insurmountable. It's not. And you have a God that wants you to experience him tangibly. And he says, just trust me. Trust me in this. I'm with you. I love you. I forgive you. And I want the best for you. So trust me in this. Trust me in this. I want to pray for us. And then we'll have this time to maybe go through some questions. And I hope begin to tangibly experience God. And also see our marriages begin to be blessed as we apply God's word. Let's pray. God, I thank you for this time. I thank you for every single person watching or listening. I pray that you'd breathe life into them right now. God, if they are feeling, oh, I'm overwhelmed, but God, would you encourage them and that, God, you can still work through this. Like, I was there. I felt insurmountable. And then over time, it happened to now be where we're at. And God, is just see what you've done. I pray that blessing upon other people's lives. I pray that you bring married couples together to have these conversations. And God, you put them on the same page, that they'd be dedicated to be people who are generous and give first and save second and live off the rest. God, that they would recognize that they are stewards and not owners. God, that they would say, we want to honor our God with what we've been given, God. And we wouldn't be people who would be emotional and go after all these wants that eventually hinder the future for ourselves or even the future for our children or our children's children, God. But we would say, how can we best maximize and leverage what God has given so we might hear, well done. Come share in your master's happiness. I pray this in Jesus' name. Amen. Well, thanks so much for joining with us. As I mentioned, take some time to go through these questions and continue pursuing Jesus because he is pursuing you. I want to encourage us to be a people that wake up, rise, and shine. That we'd wake up to Jesus, the one who took away the ultimate debt for us, took away our sin. That we'd rise to life in him, which is in our response of gratitude for what he did to purchase us back, that we'd say, I want to live in a way to honor you and use what you've given me to bring others closer to you, which includes my money. And may we shine to others. When you have the ability to give and be generous and to bless others, trust me, it shines. And people say, why did you do that? And you just simply point, because this is what God does in our lives. And so I want to do that for you. May we shine bright. Have a great week, and hope you join with us again next week.